Princess Lyra stood in the grand hall of the Xyphoran Palace, her eyes tracing the patterns of light that reflected off the crystal walls. The hall shimmered like a living rainbow as sunlight passed through the prism-like surfaces. She could hear the soft hum of the palace's energy fields beneath her feet, a constant reminder of the planet's advanced technology. But despite the beauty around her, Lyra felt trapped. "Mom, why do I have to wed a human?" she shouted, her voice echoing against the crystalline walls. Her small fists clenched at her sides as she turned toward her mother, Queen Seraphine, who was seated on a throne of smooth, pale quartz. The queen's expression was calm, almost serene. She tilted her head slightly and regarded her daughter with quiet patience. "Lyra, I understand your frustration, but this decision is not made lightly. It is for the future of our people. They cannot understand Xyphoran culture, our history, our ways." She stomped her foot, the sound sharp against the polished floor. Queen Seraphine rose slowly, her long robes brushing the floor with a soft swish. "Humans are different, yes, but difference is not weakness. We have observed their world, their achievements, their resilience. They have survived challenges that would have destroyed other civilizations. That is why this union is necessary. And yet you expect me to marry one. It is about our entire people. You have the ability to shape the next chapter of Xyphoran history. That is why this choice falls to you, and through you, to us all." Later, when the queen had left, Lyra went to the private archives. The room was filled with shelves of glowing data crystals, each containing centuries of knowledge about other worlds. She moved her hand over the controls, selecting records about humans. The crystals hummed softly as information streamed before her eyes. Their history, their technology, their explorations beyond Earth, and their attempts at diplomacy with other species. At first, she was dismissive. "Primitive," she muttered to herself, reading about their space travel methods and political debates. "They cannot compare to Xyphora." But as she read further, she could not ignore the ingenuity she saw. Humans had survived wars, natural disasters, and political upheavals. They had built machines that could travel across space and communicated with species far different from themselves. They were adaptable in ways that surprised her. Lyra leaned back, considering the data. "Perhaps," she whispered, a note of curiosity creeping into her voice. She could not deny that there was something impressive about these humans, even if they were far simpler than Xyphorans. The next day, Lyra was summoned to the palace landing bay. A sleek human shuttle had arrived from Earth, carrying the explorer who was to be her intended. The doors opened, and a man in a practical, unadorned uniform stepped out. His eyes were calm, yet they carried a quiet determination. He moved with confidence but without arrogance. This was Captain Adrian Kane. Lyra watched him carefully, noting how he observed his surroundings. He did not seem frightened by the palace's grandeur, nor did he appear overwhelmed by the unfamiliar technology. He moved with the ease of someone used to adapting to new environments. "You must be Princess Lyra," Adrian said politely, bowing slightly. His voice was steady, warm, and clear. Lyra crossed her arms, frowning. "I am, and you are the human I am supposed to marry. I find that very difficult to believe. This is unusual for both of us, I'm sure, but I am here to learn, not to impose. I hope we can learn from each other. Then I would combine what I know with what I learn from others. Perhaps I would fail at first, but each attempt teaches something new." Over the next few days, Lyra watched Adrian interact with the palace and its systems. He asked questions, offered suggestions, and treated the staff with respect. He did not try to dominate or show off. Slowly, Lyra realized that he was not arrogant or weak. He was simply different. Yet she resisted letting herself feel any warmth toward him. "I am not ready to like a human," she told herself sternly. "I am royalty, and this is politics, nothing more." She learned about humans who had saved other species, negotiated peace where others had failed, and created technology that improved life for many. Lyra sighed, feeling the first seeds of doubt about her prejudice. Perhaps her mother was right. Perhaps humans were not as primitive as she had thought. Yet the thought of marriage still felt like a loss of control, a surrender she was not ready to accept. The next morning, Lyra approached her mother. "Mom," she began cautiously, "I have read more about humans. They are interesting, resilient, adaptable, but I still do not see how marriage will help Xyphora or me. It is about partnership. Adrian has qualities that complement yours: ingenuity, determination, and respect for others. Together, you could lead, learn, and strengthen Xyphora in ways one alone cannot. You may find that this union is not a chain, but a bridge." She realized that this journey would not be simple, and her feelings toward Adrian might be more complicated than she expected. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of curiosity, a desire to see if this human could live up to the stories and records she had studied. As the sun set over the crystalline palace, Lyra stood on the balcony, looking out at Zyphora's twin moons. She felt a mix of fear and excitement, frustration and hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing: she would not simply accept her fate blindly. She would learn, observe, and perhaps one day understand the humans well enough to see if they were truly her equals. And so the first step of her journey began, not as a princess forced into a political marriage, but as a young leader ready to challenge her own assumptions and discover the truth about a species she had been taught to doubt. Princess Lyra watched as Captain Adrian Kane moved through the palace gardens with a quiet fascination. The gardens were unlike anything on Earth. Tall crystalline trees reflected soft colors across the sky, and pools of clear, luminescent water shimmered with a gentle glow. Every plant seemed to hum with life, and the air was filled with scents she could barely describe. Adrian moved carefully, his gaze taking in every detail without touching anything unnecessarily. He spoke softly to himself, noting patterns in the plant's growth and the structure of the water channels. Lyra followed him from a distance, hiding behind a cluster of tall, translucent reeds. She was determined not to show any interest, yet she found herself curious about how he would react to such an alien environment. Finally, she stepped out from her hiding place. "Captain Kane," she called, her tone sharp, testing him. "Are you capable of understanding these gardens, or are they too strange for your human mind?" "I can try to understand it, but only if I observe carefully and learn from someone knowledgeable. Even humans rely on collaboration to understand new worlds. Solve it and perhaps I will consider your worth. Fail, and you will simply remain human." The puzzle was simple in concept. The panels needed to be arranged to form a continuous flow of light from one side to the other. But the arrangement was not merely logical. It required intuition and careful observation of subtle changes in color and reflection. Adrian studied the dome in silence. He did not touch anything at first. Instead, he walked around, observing how the light shifted with each movement of the panels. He noted patterns that Lyra had assumed would go unnoticed. He asked her questions, small, precise questions about the materials, the source of light, and the intended effect. Lyra watched, surprised. Most humans she had read about would have tried to force a solution or guessed randomly. Adrian's approach was methodical, patient, and respectful. He was learning from the system rather than trying to dominate it. After some time, Adrian carefully adjusted a few panels. Light flowed seamlessly through the dome, reflecting in a perfect spectrum. Lyra blinked, unable to hide her astonishment. I did not expect that," she admitted. Adrian looked at her with a calm smile. "I did not expect it either. But observation, patience, and learning from those who know more can be surprisingly effective." Over the next few days, Lyra observed Adrian in various parts of the palace. He watched the engineers calibrate the energy fields beneath the palace floors and asked intelligent questions about their methods. He explored the library archives with curiosity, not arrogance, carefully studying Zyphoran history, science, and art. Lyra began to notice a pattern. Adrian did not merely look at what was in front of him. He tried to understand the reasoning behind it. He made suggestions when appropriate, always respectfully, and listened carefully when corrected. He was not trying to outshine anyone, but to learn and contribute. One afternoon, the Queen invited Lyra and Adrian to a formal dinner with several ambassadors. The event was designed to showcase Zyphoran culture, and Lyra initially dreaded it. She worried that Adrian would embarrass her or fail to understand protocol. To her surprise, Adrian observed carefully before acting. He noticed the subtle cues of Zyphoran etiquette and mimicked them appropriately. When he was unsure, he asked polite questions. His respect for the culture impressed not only Lyra, but also the visiting ambassadors. He engaged in conversation, asking intelligent questions about Zyphoran history and sharing human experiences without arrogance. Lyra could feel herself softening. The human she had assumed would be clumsy and ignorant was thoughtful, adaptable, and sincere. She found herself genuinely interested in his perspective. That evening, after the ambassadors had left, Lyra and Adrian walked through the palace corridors. The soft lights reflected in the crystal walls, creating a serene atmosphere. Lyra decided to speak her mind. "Captain Kane," she said cautiously, "I admit that I misjudged you. You are different from what I expected." But I still do not understand why you are the one I am supposed to marry. How can a human truly be an equal partner for a Zyphoran princess? Humans may not have the same abilities as Zyphorans, but we have qualities that can complement yours. Together, perhaps we can achieve more than either of us could alone. But real life is more complicated. You cannot simply impress me with words and polite behavior. He was not arrogant, nor was he trying to dominate her. Instead, he approached her as an equal, even if he was human. She could see that he genuinely wanted to understand her world, not exploit it. The next morning, Lyra decided to test Adrian in a more practical way. She led him to the palace's hydroponic gardens, where engineers were struggling to balance the nutrient levels for a delicate set of plants. Lyra knew that humans had some experience with agriculture, and she wondered if Adrian could offer a fresh perspective. Adrian studied the system carefully. He observed the growth patterns, measured water flow, and asked questions about past adjustments. Then, using a combination of human methods and the knowledge he had gained about Zyphoran systems, he suggested a series of subtle changes. Within hours, the plants showed signs of improvement. Lyra could hardly hide her amazement. "I did not think a human could solve this," she admitted, her voice a mixture of surprise and admiration. Adrian smiled. "It is not about being human or Zyphoran. It is about observing, understanding, and applying knowledge carefully. Everyone can contribute, regardless of origin." That evening, Lyra returned to the archives. She reviewed more records of humans, this time looking for qualities beyond technology: art, diplomacy, resilience, and creativity. She realized that humans had survived challenges that Zyphorans had not faced, often by thinking differently and cooperating in ways her people sometimes overlooked. Lyra sighed, realizing that her understanding of humans was changing. Perhaps her mother had been right. Perhaps humans were not as primitive as she had believed. Yet she reminded herself that respect and admiration did not mean love or acceptance of marriage. That was a choice she would have to make later on her own terms. As she stood by the balcony, watching the twin moons of Zyphora rise in the sky, Lyra felt a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. She realized that her journey with Adrian would be a test, not of obedience, but of understanding. She would need to challenge her assumptions, observe carefully, and decide for herself whether humans could truly be partners for Zyphorans. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Crystal Palace. Lyra knew that the coming days would bring more challenges, more puzzles, and more opportunities to see the truth of humans. But for the first time, she was not just resisting. She was watching, learning, and quietly wondering what a human could teach her. And in that moment, the princess realized something important. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries come not from exploring distant stars, but from opening one's mind to the unexpected. The morning light poured over Zyphora's crystal spires, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the palace grounds. Princess Lyra stood on the balcony, looking out at the city below. Everything appeared calm and perfect, but the peace was only temporary. The planet itself was preparing a test that no one could ignore. Deep in the central energy core of the palace, sensors began sending alerts. The climate control system that regulated Zyphora's atmosphere was behaving unpredictably. Temperatures in some regions were rising while others were cooling drastically. The delicate balance that sustained the planet's unique ecosystems was threatened. The palace engineers scrambled to understand the malfunction, but the complexity of the system had them baffled. Lyra felt a wave of unease. She had spent her life trusting the systems that kept her planet safe, yet now she realized that even advanced technology could fail. She hurried to the core control room, where the lead engineers were gathered around the holographic display of the planetary climate grid. "Princess Lyra," the chief engineer said respectfully, "we have never encountered anything like this. The control nodes are misfiring, and the automated correction protocols are insufficient. We do not know how long we have before the imbalance becomes critical. Can humans help us solve this?" She realized that his approach was very different from the palace engineers. They relied on procedure and protocol, while Adrian combined observation, logic, and creativity. "Your systems are remarkable," he said finally. "But the problem seems to be the way the nodes adjust to fluctuating inputs. You rely on constant feedback loops that cannot adapt quickly enough to sudden changes. If we introduce a temporary damping algorithm and adjust the energy flow manually while stabilizing the nodes, we might restore balance." Lyra observed the process, fascinated by the human's ability to communicate, problem-solve, and coordinate effectively. He did not dominate the room. He offered guidance and considered every suggestion from the engineers. The combination of human flexibility and Xiphoran knowledge began to make sense of the chaos. Hours passed. The system responded slowly at first, but then the temperature readings started to stabilize. Pools of water returned to normal levels, and the air circulation smoothed out. Lyra felt a sense of relief she had never expected. Adrian had not only helped solve the problem, but he had also earned the respect of the engineers. When the final node stabilized, Lyra approached Adrian. "I underestimated humans," she admitted, her voice tinged with awe. "I did not think you could contribute in a way that would truly matter to Xiphora. Anyone can achieve results with patience and collaboration." He showed her techniques for thinking outside conventional structures, for looking at challenges from multiple angles, and for combining knowledge from different disciplines. Lyra found herself experimenting with these methods in small projects around the palace. She saw how they improved efficiency and sparked creativity among the staff. One afternoon, Lyra led Adrian to a secondary climate regulation hub, a smaller facility responsible for maintaining the delicate ecosystems in Xiphora's floating gardens. The plants there were unusually sensitive, responding not just to temperature and humidity, but also to light frequency and energy flow in subtle ways. "The engineers have tried many solutions," Lyra explained, "but nothing has stabilized the gardens fully. They say it may be impossible. If we adjust the nutrient flow slightly and introduce a minor feedback loop for each plant cluster, we can help them self-correct without overloading the main system." Within hours, the plants began to stabilize, leaves glowing with renewed vitality. The engineers, who had been skeptical at first, approached Adrian with expressions of respect. "Your methods, they are unusual but effective," one said. Adrian shrugged modestly. "Unusual does not mean wrong. Sometimes different perspectives are necessary to solve problems." That evening, Lyra and Adrian walked through the palace gardens, the air cool and balanced after the day's work. Lyra felt a mixture of pride and admiration. "I never imagined a human could understand Xiphora this well," she said. "You have proven me wrong. I hope that we learn from each other, and that you see humans as capable allies, not merely as visitors. I do not seek to impress, only to cooperate and learn. That is what humans do best, we adapt and grow." She realized that her journey with Adrian was not merely a political arrangement. It was an opportunity to explore what two very different species could accomplish together. The following days brought more challenges, each highlighting the strengths of humans and Xiphorans alike. Adrian helped optimize energy distribution across the city, assisted in organizing educational simulations for the palace children, and even offered insights into cultural exchanges that improved understanding between Xiphorans and visiting species. Lyra observed all of this, feeling admiration grow alongside her respect. One evening, as the twin moons of Xiphora rose in the sky, Lyra stood on the balcony, reflecting on the past week. The crisis in the climate system had been frightening, yet it had revealed something she had never expected. Humans were not the inferior species she had assumed. They had a different kind of intelligence, a kind that complemented Xiphoran skills rather than competed with them. Lyra realized that her mother's decision, which had seemed oppressive at first, held wisdom she had not understood. The union with a human might not just serve political purposes. It might also serve to bridge two worlds, combining strengths in ways that could benefit both species. For the first time, Lyra felt a spark of curiosity about the future. Perhaps this human, Captain Adrian Kane, was not just a visitor or an obligation. Perhaps he could be a partner, someone with whom she could explore the unknown, solve problems, and learn new ways of thinking. As the night deepened and the palace lights reflected off the crystalline walls, Lyra knew that her journey had only just begun. She would continue to test Adrian, observe him, and see how far his ingenuity and patience could go. She felt a quiet excitement at the possibilities that lay ahead, not just for her, but for Xiphora itself. And in that moment, the princess realized that sometimes the greatest discoveries were not about distant stars or uncharted planets, but about seeing the true potential in those who were different from oneself. The soft glow of Xiphora's twin moons bathed the palace gardens in silver light. Princess Lyra walked along the crystalline pathways, her mind still occupied with the events of the past weeks. The climate crisis had tested human and Xyphoran cooperation, and she had been forced to acknowledge Captain Adrian Kane's abilities. Yet, Lyra knew that understanding skills and abilities was different from truly understanding a person. Adrian approached quietly, carrying a small set of holographic tablets. "Princess Lyra," he said, "I thought we could continue our studies of Xyphoran energy distribution. Some simulations might show patterns we missed before. Let's see what your human perspective can offer." "You approach this like a scientist," he said finally. "You observe first, then test solutions. That is admirable. May I suggest a different approach? Humans sometimes try pattern recognition before intervention. It can reveal correlations that are not obvious from direct observation alone." "You mean you want to predict outcomes before adjusting anything?" After several attempts, he identified subtle patterns in energy fluctuations that Lyra had not noticed. She felt a rush of admiration. "I must admit, Captain Kane, this method is effective. Both approaches have value." She realized that his knowledge was not only technical but also deeply human. "Humans seem persistent," she said thoughtfully. "Even when things fail, they keep trying." They were simple, yet they carried weight. She realized that persistence, patience, and adaptability were qualities she had not fully appreciated before. Humans may not have had the innate powers of Xyphorans, but they had something equally valuable: determination, ingenuity, and empathy. Over the following days, Lyra and Adrian worked on several projects together. They designed improvements for the palace's energy systems, optimized nutrient distribution in the floating gardens, and even experimented with new learning programs for the palace scholars. Each project highlighted their complementary skills: Lyra's intuition and deep knowledge of Xyphoran systems, Adrian's creative problem-solving, and his ability to see patterns differently. During one project, Lyra introduced Adrian to Xyphoran art and philosophy. They examined paintings that shifted color based on the observer's mood and studied philosophical texts exploring the nature of consciousness and energy. Adrian listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and drawing connections to human experiences and beliefs. "Your culture is astonishing," he said one afternoon. "The way you integrate art, science, and philosophy, it is unlike anything I have ever seen. Humans could learn much from this perspective. But potential is just the beginning. Collaboration allows both species to grow, to learn from each other, and to improve. That is why I value this partnership." She had expected arrogance or incompetence, but instead, she found intelligence, patience, and a willingness to learn. One evening, Lyra and Adrian were walking through the floating gardens when they noticed a group of young Xyphoran scholars struggling with an experiment. The students were attempting to create a miniature ecosystem using energy fields and plant growth controls, but the system kept destabilizing. Lyra approached them, her voice calm but firm. "What seems to be the problem?" Lyra examined the system briefly, then stepped back, allowing Adrian to observe. Adrian knelt by the control console, carefully noting the timing of energy pulses and nutrient flows. "I think the issue is not the technology, but the timing," he explained. Adjusting the sequence slightly and introducing small feedback checks for each plant cluster should stabilize the system. Lyra observed silently, feeling a quiet sense of pride, not only in Adrian's skill but in her own willingness to allow him to contribute. After the students left, Lyra turned to Adrian. "You have a remarkable ability to help others learn, not just solve problems. Humans truly do approach challenges differently. Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. That is one of humanity's strengths." In the following days, Lyra and Adrian faced smaller challenges that tested their teamwork and trust. They navigated misunderstandings with palace staff, adapted energy systems to unexpected fluctuations, and collaborated on cultural programs for visiting dignitaries. Each situation required patience, communication, and a balance of human and Xyphoran perspectives. Through these experiences, Lyra felt her respect for Adrian deepen. He was not just capable, he was thoughtful, adaptable, and sincere. She began to see that he could be more than a partner in diplomacy. He could be a partner in discovery, innovation, and understanding. One afternoon, Lyra found herself in the palace archives, reading historical accounts of Xyphoran alliances with other species. She realized that many of these alliances had failed because one side had imposed its methods on the other. Mutual respect and understanding had been rare. Yet here was Adrian, demonstrating both qualities naturally. Lyra closed the crystal tablet, feeling a sense of clarity. Perhaps her mother's decision was not simply political. Perhaps it was an opportunity, a chance to build a true bridge between worlds, a partnership that could set an example for both species. That evening, as the twin moons rose over Zyphora, Lyra and Adrian stood on the palace balcony, gazing at the horizon. The city below shimmered with lights, reflecting in the crystalline surfaces of the buildings and trees. "Do you ever wonder," Lyra asked softly, "what it would be like if humans and Zyphorans had always worked together? Perhaps there is much we can accomplish together." But she had begun to see the potential for true collaboration, respect, and understanding. The partnership her mother had envisioned was slowly taking shape, not as a constraint, but as an opportunity for growth and discovery. As the night deepened, Lyra realized that this journey with Adrian was more than a test of patience or diplomacy. It was a journey of understanding, of learning to see value in differences, and of discovering that strength could take many forms. Humans, she now understood, had qualities that were powerful not because they were like Zyphorans, but because they were different. And for the first time, Lyra felt hope, not only for herself, but for Zyphora, for humanity, and for the possibilities that lay ahead. The palace was quiet in the early morning, bathed in soft light from Zyphora's twin moons that lingered on the horizon. Princess Lyra stood on her balcony, her mind filled with the events of the past weeks. The challenges they had faced together, the climate crisis, the energy simulations, and the floating garden experiments, had changed her perspective completely. She had begun to see Captain Adrian Kane not just as a visitor or a political arrangement, but as a partner, someone whose qualities complemented her own. Adrian joined her quietly, holding a small hollow tablet. "Good morning, Princess," he said, his tone gentle but steady. "I thought we could review the latest simulations for the energy network. There are some optimizations we can test today." Lyra observed them carefully, noticing the subtle coordination and trust that had developed over time. Adrian moved among the staff, offering suggestions and listening attentively to their insights. His calm confidence and respect for Zyphoran knowledge had earned their trust completely. "Your people are impressive," Adrian said quietly to Lyra as they observed the simulations. "They are capable and intelligent, but they sometimes hesitate to trust outsiders' perspectives. Trust is earned slowly." Their partnership was no longer hypothetical. It had become real through action, observation, and respect. That afternoon, Lyra called a council meeting with the palace advisors and visiting diplomats. She and Adrian presented a joint initiative, a program that combined human and Zyphoran knowledge to improve planetary sustainability, education, and interstellar cooperation. The plan included new methods of energy management, collaborative learning programs, and cultural exchanges designed to strengthen understanding between species. The council listened attentively, clearly impressed. Lyra spoke confidently, explaining the goals and benefits of the program. Adrian supported her explanations with practical demonstrations, showing simulations and examples of how human problem-solving could complement Zyphoran technology. One ambassador leaned forward. "This is extraordinary," he said. "We have seen alliances before, but never one where both species contribute equally to innovation and understanding." She realized that her mother's decision, which had seemed burdensome at first, had been a wise choice. This partnership was not a limitation. It was an opportunity to shape the future in ways that neither humans nor Zyphorans could achieve alone. After the council meeting, Lyra and Adrian walked through the gardens, reflecting on the discussions. Lyra noticed the subtle changes in the floating gardens, the energy networks, and even in the palace staff. There was a sense of optimism and collaboration that had not existed before. "You see the results of cooperation," Adrian said softly. "When different perspectives come together, the outcome is often greater than what either could achieve alone." And I realized that the partnership we were told to form, it is not just about politics. It is about understanding, respect, and shared growth. That is the human way, and it seems the Zyphoran way as well. She began to see that the union her mother had envisioned could indeed become a true partnership, one based on mutual understanding rather than obligation. One evening, Lyra invited Adrian to the palace archives. They sat together, reviewing records of human exploration, Zyphoran history, and interstellar diplomacy. Lyra realized that the knowledge they shared and the insights they gained were creating a bond far deeper than she had anticipated. "Adrian," she said thoughtfully, I once thought humans were limited. I judged you before I knew you. But now I see that our differences can be our greatest strength. I have always believed that respect, collaboration, and curiosity are more important than any physical or innate abilities. Humans may not have the powers of Xiphorans, but we have perseverance, adaptability, and the desire to grow. Perhaps together, we can achieve far more than I ever imagined. Our goal was to combine the strengths of our two species, human and Xiphoran, to address challenges that neither could solve alone. By respecting each other's knowledge and learning from one another, we discovered solutions that were previously unimaginable. He spoke of adaptability, creativity, and collaboration, emphasizing that different perspectives were not a limitation but a source of innovation. The audience was captivated. Diplomats asked questions, engineers took notes, and scholars discussed the new methods animatedly. Lyra watched, feeling a sense of pride and fulfillment. She realized that this was more than success in a political or technological sense. It was proof that collaboration across species could lead to meaningful progress. After the presentation, Lyra and Adrian walked through the palace gardens in quiet reflection. The stars above shone brightly, and the gentle hum of the palace energy systems filled the air. "You have exceeded my expectations," Lyra said softly. "Not just in skill, but in patience, understanding, and wisdom. I see now why my mother chose this partnership." She had begun the journey with resistance and skepticism, but now she felt understanding, respect, and even anticipation for the future. She realized that marriage, once a concept she had dreaded, could become a partnership of equals, one based on trust, cooperation, and shared purpose. The next morning, Queen Seraphine called Lyra to her chamber. The queen's expression was serene, but her eyes held a quiet warmth. "Lyra, I have observed your progress with Captain Kane. You have grown in understanding, in wisdom, and in perspective. Tell me, what do you feel about the alliance now?" "Captain Kane is not just a visitor or a political tool. He is capable, thoughtful, and wise in ways I had not expected. I respect him, and I believe that together we can shape a future that benefits both humans and Xiphorans. The union is not just political. It is a bridge between worlds, built on understanding and respect." She knew that the road ahead would have challenges, but she also knew that together she and Adrian could meet them. Later that evening, Lyra and Adrian stood on the palace terrace, gazing at the stars. The city below shimmered with lights, reflecting in the crystal surfaces, and the soft glow of the moons added a magical touch to the scene. "Adrian," Lyra said softly, "I used to fear this union. I thought it would limit me or define me against my will. But now I see it differently. I see partnership, respect, and shared purpose. I am ready to embrace this future with you, not because I must, but because I choose to. I will do my best to be a partner worthy of your trust, respect, and collaboration." As the night deepened, Lyra and Adrian stood side by side, looking out at the horizon. The palace glimmered below them, the city alive with the possibilities of a brighter future. Lyra felt a sense of hope and purpose, knowing that the path ahead would be guided by partnership, respect, and the belief that together, two very different species could achieve greatness. And for the first time, Princess Lyra understood that the future was not something to fear, but something to build, with courage, collaboration, and trust. Humanity had shown its strength not through domination, but through creativity, perseverance, and the ability to learn. And in that truth, Lyra found both admiration and inspiration. The princess and the human captain stood together, united in vision and purpose, ready to face the future, not as two separate worlds, but as partners shaping a destiny filled with possibility, understanding, and hope.